Hi, my name is Lindros, and I am originally from Southern California. I'm now studying at UC Merced in Central California on native Yokut land. I took the MESA Agroecology class through UC Merced. I learned so much. I see myself more in my community, and it shaped my future career. Since taking the class, I've become a UC Master Gardener, and I'm the student coordinator for the UC Merced Campus Garden, whose mission it is to provide food for the food security initiatives on campus, such as the Bobcat Pantry. We grow lots of fruits and veggies for the students. The MESA program really encouraged me to take action in making the garden a more sustainable and comfortable place to live, finding small ways to make food security more of a reality in the campus and in students' lives. And I really highly encourage anyone interested to take the class to take it and to take action in their own communities. In the future, I'd like to go to grad school to study how we can make better places and environments that center both biodiversity and human rights, using spatial technology and also some ethnographic methods. So yeah, that's me. I am a graduate of the Training in Applied Agroecology program from MESA in the UC Merced cohort. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about Socio Environmental Rights, which is a huge topic with so many perspectives and cool schools of thought, but I'm going to do just a little part of it justice. First, I think it's good to understand why environmental rights are part of the greater human rights debate. And this quote on the screen is from the United Nations, and it reads, "Without a healthy environment, we are unable to fulfill our aspirations. We may not even have access to the minimum standards of human dignity." And it's interesting to think about how the world's governments may or may not think about this quote in their public policy and how it's affecting communities. A reason why environmental rights should be framed as human rights is that indigenous rights are absolutely key to making agriculture and biodiverse land healthy. For example, I think there's a myth of this untouched land that's we need to conserve, and then that's entirely separate from human rights, which might be even at odds with it as we take up resources. And that's really not the case. Certain organizations I will not name but are funded by very harmful corporations are taking land from Native people in the name of conservation. In reality, Indigenous people protect up to 80% of the world's biodiversity. So that's a huge amount, obviously, and that's why it's crucial to see the Earth as a place where humans and quote-unquote wilderness coexist and whose rights overlap. Environmental health is crucial for human wellness, and conversely, uplifting Indigenous peoples are crucial for successful land management. And in my opinion, I think it's really important to see that tie-in to sort of reframe the idea of conservation being natural wilderness only, and the fact that wilderness doesn't affect human lives like it's some untouched place, and more of the here and now, the reality of so many groups of people's health and wellness intrinsically linked to the environment around them. And that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the major issues that are affecting environmental rights right now. Generally, I've found two categories of what I would call violations of environmental rights. One category is injustices that come about due to proximity to poor land management or toxic human activity, and these can be air pollution, either from smog or from wildfires. I know a lot of people are dealing with both of those right now. Oil spills, contamination, toxic pesticides, which actually agroecology directly addresses, fracking, and then proximity to landfills. And then the second group of injustices that kind of deal with the intentional and sometimes intentionally violent acts of people and land that strip resources away from other people, especially marginalized people. And these can include water access, food deserts, or as more people call them nowadays, food apartheid, which is essentially not having access to culturally appropriate or nutritious food. Definitely recommend looking into food sovereignty. And then also some things like that are affecting more urban places, such as redlining. If you're unfamiliar with redlining, it's a major tactic of racial segregation, which sort of feeds into the many factors of environmental racism. That can include infrastructure, such as highways built to literally segregate groups of people, or even buildings that have contracts that only allow certain people to move in. And then simple overexploitation of resources that really put a strain on so many communities. And notice that some of these are directly related to climate change, but a lot actually predate our framing of climate disasters due to human activity, especially environmental rights that take away food or water access, which has happened for hundreds of years. And unfortunately, it is the most vulnerable groups of people who have to bear the burden of environmental rights injustice the most. For example, the countries that are emitting the least amount of carbon emissions right now are shown to be the most vulnerable to the catastrophic effects of climate change, which threatens human rights such as access to food and shelter. This is one of the many reasons why human rights violations are not just a thing of the past, but an actively ongoing project that we need to fight against in our own communities. However, as you see on the screen, there's a lot of ways to take action against these human rights injustices. And I'd like to share just one of the many ways people can fight for socio-environmental rights. This graphic is modeled after a community action timeline by the World Resources Institute. And this process I think is amazing because it centers community action. So the first step is looking for what information is available and what information the community needs to make their own decisions about what is affecting them. And I think that's important to help hold people accountable for human rights and sociospatial rights and who is governing that and if they're accountable to their own communities. For example, in Central California where I live, there are water quality watchdogs and anti-fracking organizations, and their job is to keep tabs on what corporations are doing with the environment. And I would totally suggest looking for those in your own community. And as a community goes through these steps, it may end up that they find themselves confronting established systems with the power of environmental knowledge and community action. But again, this is just one of so many ways to get involved in socio-environmental rights. There are a lot of schools of thought that focus more on action that doesn't end up in legal change, and there's so many little pieces to the larger movement to work towards. I personally feel pretty small in the big scheme of things, but I am really excited about increasing UC Merced's biodiversity and food security, and that's just a little way that I can contribute. As you can see on the Agroecology Flower, which is the main teaching school of the MESA beginning course, there are just so many ways to approach a school of thought, and they are all interconnected. Some of the petals in the flower that I think are particularly powerful are public policy advocacy, participatory action, and decolonization, all of which are videos on this channel that you can learn more about, but these are the ones that stand out to me as ideal stages for framing environmental rights. Finally, I'd like to share the sources that I used for this presentation. Two books that I can recommend reading about this topic are Fresh Banana Leaves by Jessica Hernandez, that's on the screen right there, and Dispossessing the Wilderness by Mark David Spence. Both are written by Indigenous scholars and they're just so powerful. You can contact me in the UC Merced Garden. If you're in the area, we always need volunteers for weeding and harvesting. Again, our mission is to give nutritious fruits and veggies to the student community. So thank you so much for letting me share a little bit about my knowledge journey about this topic, and I hope to learn so much more in the future. Thank you so much.